Today, is the Blacktown LGA the dead canary in the coal mine? Hello again, it's Martin North from Digital Finance Analytics. Welcome to our latest post covering finance and property news with a distinctively Australian flavour. Today, I'm joined again by Edwin Almeida, our property insider. Hello, Edwin.
Hello, Martin. How are you going?
Pretty good. Now, we're going to talk specifically about the Blacktown area, an area that you know extremely well. And I think we can both agree that it is really a forward indicator of what is going to happen more broadly across the country.
Very much so, Martin. It was the indicator in the early 2000 property downturn, and prior to that, and as I've been saying for the last 2 years or so, that this is going to be the indicator once again. And because the Blacktown LGA is a very interesting LGA, Martin, it has a very broad and extensive demographics in relation to population, as well as the topography and all the, everything around it. You've got your shopping centres, you've got your new developments, your new hubs, you've got your, $1.7 million homes in your Kellyvilles or those areas up there, and as well as you've got your old and very well-established subdivisions from 27 years ago. So it's a very, very interesting mix of townhouses, medium density, high density in the centre of Blacktown, of course, and you've also got your land subdivision. So it's a very, very interesting. I've been saying that Blacktown LGA is the canary in the coal mine, and as you've rightly said, it's now the dead canary in the coal mine.
Okay, so Edwin, I think before we get started, let's just be clear. Blacktown LGA is quite a big area, so give us a few of the regions and areas that people will know in that part of the country.
You've got the ponds, you've got the Mount Druitt areas, you've got parts of the Glenwood, some people will know as Park Lee, Stanhope Gardens and the like. It sort of more or less borders the Parramatta LGA, heading that way, down towards Rooty Hill, towards Mount Druitt. So it is a very, very broad and extensive landmass. The 2148 postcode and the surrounding areas, your Quakers Hills and the like.
Yeah, okay, and it's worth saying that that particular area is registering quite strongly on the Richter scale in terms of mortgage stress and negative equity. So it's a very interesting example of what's going on.
Yeah, look, it's and because of your Kellyville subdivisions, you got your Bella Vista areas more towards obviously the Balkan Hills area and so forth. It borders on all these fringes. You've got your $1.7 million homes to your older and more established fibro homes closer to the centre, and older apartments, medium density subdivisions, as well as your high rise in the centre of Blacktown. It's a very, very good mix. It was the litmus test or the canary in the coal mine in the previous downturn, as I said, and prior to that as well. So it's and it's perhaps one of the biggest LGAs in terms of population and not so much land, but in population and the diversity of population in Australia. So hence the reason why it's a good interesting point of reference to see what the property market's going to do. There's a lot of investors. I mean, there's owner occupiers as well, first home buyers. In some parts of the Mount Druitt area, you've got investors that own 5 to 10 to maybe even 12, 15 homes.
Sure, yeah, and you're right. I mean, if I look at my data, I see pretty much all types of segments, household segments there. But there seem to me to be quite a lot of people who bought quite recently in the last 2 or 3 years. So they bought at the top of the market, and now they see prices coming down. Quite a lot of property investors have bought in there, and as you say, quite a lot of multiple investors, and also people have bought into some of those new high rises and have paid top dollar for some of the new developments, and those prices are also sliding. So pretty much wherever you look, there's a lot going on. So what's the average movement in home prices been over the last little while?
Look, Our figures come in at closer to 22-23%, Martin, for a number of these areas. The apartment wise, well, look, there were a number of news articles in the high rise development there in Blacktown as to how he got sold over one weekend. At that time, I replied to that article that was being pushed out with the mainstream media, and I said, look, it's not about how quickly it sells for. It's going to be about how quickly or how effectively the settlements are going to be and what it's going to be worth at the end. Now, this development was sold off the plan in 2015. They pretty much settled by February, March of 2018, and now a number of the 3-bedroom apartments which were sold for $750,000 plus. That $750 was the bottom of the range. They're now back on the market at $550. So that gives you an insight as to what's happening there. Now, obviously, a lot of developments in the area are suffering because of that. So prices are continuously dropping. From a year ago, the offices that I work with in the area sold the older, more established apartments again. So they're about 35, 40 years old. Sold 14, 15 months ago for around 425, 430,000, and now they're on the market at 320, 340. So there is a lot of movement, and I started talking about this in mid 2017, where some of the older fibro homes in the areas that were selling and were fetching 750,000 and a bit higher, in some cases 800,000 on 600 square meters of land or thereabouts, were being snapped up by what you've just mentioned, the investors that have come in the last 2 years. The reason being, Martin, is that they were snapping these up because the goal was to clean the main dwelling and put a granny flat at the back. So it was more or less income driven. They wanted to do that in order then to flip them, add value and flip them. I mean, there were notions, if you recall, in the mainstream where Blacktown and even Mount Druitt got into the ranks of the $1 million suburbs and so forth. I mean, it was mind-boggling. The Mount Druitt area, we sold properties there. One that I can talk about specifically, one of my nephew's properties, where I encouraged him to sell in 2017. In the middle of 2017, we achieved a sale of 525. That better homes than his property that we sold back late 2017 are now on the market at 410. Offers between 390 and 410, and that gives you the gauge. Now, had he sold even 3 months earlier than what he came on the market at, was encouraging to sell 6 months earlier, but he was a little bit reluctant because his financial planner and his accountant told him, "Why would you want to sell a blue chip investment like that?" Well, now he knows why. He should listen to his uncle rather than the financial planner that led him astray and wanted him to buy an off-the-plan apartment.
Well, that's an interesting story in itself, isn't it? But just going back to this 22%, right? So I agree with you. Having run my models and looking at the negative equity scenarios, there are a number of properties in that particular area well above 20% drop from when they were purchased, right? So that's significant, right? Because many people tried to put in a 20% deposit to be able to avoid having to get lender's mortgage insurance, right? So that 20% hurdle is actually quite significant. So they're dropped below that now. And of course, if you then think about the costs of transacting, you've got additional stamp duty costs and other things to add in. So you're already looking at 22, 23, 24% off from the peak. Plus, of course, you've got to think about the property and the land, right? Because I suspect that both the land and the buildings are both going down.
That's correct. Look, we touched on a little bit in one of our previous videos that we did last year, Martin, and I said that there is some intrinsic value to all these older homes. Of course, there is value to a dwelling, but let's not kid ourselves. Dwellings get old; they depreciate. Land, if anything, is what really appreciates. When you do a proper valuation, it'd be great for you to do an interview with a valuer to understand how, for them to give you the more in detail what how they operate or how valuations work. And I mean, it's there's a science behind it. It's not just a guessing game, and obviously part of the value is attributed to the home, and also then there's the value of the land. Now, I've noted that in the last few years we've seen land values drop considerably, even up to close to 30%, where at one stage in parts of the Blacktown LGA, closer to Blacktown itself, the city centre, we were achieving sales of, let's say, after you took into consideration the value of the dwelling, because they do have a value given the fact that they can be leased out. They are leased out. There's an income that can be earned from it. So I calculated the values. We were getting close and upwards of $1,300 a square metre. Now, in the same and adjoining blocks or surrounding blocks of land, parcels of land where, for some reason or another, the government is selling off some of its assets that are the older, say, what people would know as housing commission assets and the like, or even some people, some properties just that far gone that they have to be demolished and they only get sold as land value. Now we're looking at land values of closer to 650 to 700 a square metre. Now, further afield, obviously those land values drop. And this is a lot of the thing that you've got your land value component, you've got your intrinsic or the value of the dwelling, whether it was an established or a new dwelling. There is a price, and the values have their ways of calculating this. Of course, many of us that have been on the field for many years, we can do a lot of the mathematics in our heads as well, because we've talked to values over the years. We understand the science, and having understand and having a background in building and construction, we can get a better idea what the values are. So when you take, they're the real values of the property, but unfortunately in the hype, then there was all the emotional value that people put on the dwellings, and the foreseeable flipping or added values and so forth, and that's where they got into trouble. So as you said, you take out once you take out the deposit. So in real terms, there's been more like a 22% drop in values overall in homes in the area. CoreLogic would report it to roughly around 13 to 15% at the moment, but it's running a lot higher. Obviously, they're taking averages. We're looking more into detail. Some places are even closer to 30%, but our averages are closer to the 22%. So there goes a 20% deposit of let's say an average home at the time that was bought for $750,000. So there's $150,000 just gone off the bat. Then there's your costs, obviously your stamp duty is another 4%. Holding cost, I estimate to be about 2%. And although people may say, Martin, that, well, hold on a minute, I'm not, I'm paying the bank, but no, you're really just paying the interest. You have been the majority of the time just been paying the interest, and when you deduct what you would actually be paying in rent to the interest component, there's a 2% difference that you're paying more. So rents have really dropped in value in the last 3 years. That the difference is 2% on average. So that's another yearly cost that people are paying. Then let's keep in mind that whether they bought something new or whether they bought an older, more established home, there's the overcapitalization, as I call it. Because when you buy something off the plan, or you buy these kit homes to put on land. They give you what's called turnkey, and then you've got to put your driveways on, you've got to put your gardens. Then in the process of construction, Mary didn't like the kitchen. She upgraded from 20 mil, Caesar stone bench tops to 40 mil, and they didn't like the tiles going halfway up the wall, so they went all the way up to the ceiling. The skirting boards were too small. Didn't like this color, whatever. So the budget gets blown out. So they overcapitalise on the new construction, but they also overcapitalise in the older established home, because then they start doing the renovations. So then you can add another 2.5% to 3% ongoing costs added onto what that property has generally cost you. And then, Martin, with the older homes, I figured there's the continual depreciation, and in other words, the repairs and maintenance on those things are going to add another 3 to 5%, depending what condition you bought it in. I mean, there were some silly prices being thrown around at the time, in some homes that you wouldn't let your ex-mother-in-law live in there, because it was just that bad. So we really reverted back to its actual land value. But people bought them, and people spent a fortune on them. They spent over $150,000 doing them up, to end up with a property that cost them anywhere between $750,000 and $850,000 at the end, to get $450 a week rent.
Yep. And the maths just don't work, do they, on that?
No, they don't, and I haven't for many years. And this is why a lot of the people that jumped into the market, they didn't really sit down, take a breath, and really analyze it, because at the end of the day, the majority, not everybody, but the majority were banking on the fact that properties were going to keep on going up and up in value. But then again, Martin, when you've got research companies that have squares or round circles or triangles about them, and you've got property analysts, as I said before, with doctorates behind them, telling them that the land is in short supply, buy now. Property goes up in value every 7 to 10 years. Of course they're going to jump in, and it was the Ponzi scheme that we knew it was, and Lindsay propagated that, and he tried to get it out there, and people were just not listening.
Sure. Well, it's, of course, there's a generation of people who've only ever seen properties go up. And if you're in a situation where you say, well, I'll wear the running costs of the investment property, say, because I know that my rental stream is going to be less than the cost of the mortgage, but I'm going to see this massive capital gain over 5 years, and by the way, the government gives me some of that back in tax as well. You can understand why people got lured in, right? But we're now in a very different situation where prices have slid. We also know that rental streams are now getting squeezed as well, and I know in this particular area rental streams are now significantly lower than they were. And my calculations would suggest that nearly 60% of property investors in that LGA, on a cash flow basis, are losing money week in, week out. And irrespective of what happens to the capital value, that's going down as well now, it's a lose-lose, isn't it? I can't see any reason for holding the property, frankly.
No, it is, and this is another stick of dynamite to what you just mentioned there, Martin. And that is a lot of people don't realise that quite a lot of these subdivisions further out west in Schofields and the like, another area that belongs to the Blacktown LGA. I mean, I've seen plans, and I've gone through the planning websites. There's 13,000 apartments, close to 15,000 apartments in the planning stages for that area. Two things: who the hell is going to rent them? And secondly, back in the day, they were considered as no-go zones because it was a flood area.
Yep.
So there are geographical issues with a lot of these subdivisions. But going back to the rental scenario, like I was having a discussion with one of the property managers, one of the teams, a couple of days ago, and I threw out a few questions. I said, "How are you guys going with your rentals?" I said, "Oh, mate, we got to reduce the prices every week. Otherwise, we're not getting tenants. We don't know where they're going." And I said, "What are you talking about? You don't know where they're going? I've been telling you where they're going. They're going to the new shiny boxes that are being built further out." And then they said, "Well, but why would they want to go further out, Edwin?" And I said, "Look, let's take a step back. Most of the people that are renting in these areas have obtained government assistance. So in the first instance, they're not moving further away from work because a lot of them aren't working. And it's a lot better for the government to subsidise a rental property that's new than it is for them to subsidise a rental property that is old, that many investors have left unattended for many years. And because they also get less complaints. People don't realise that when you're managing these properties, the state government is also managing a group of people, and they've got teams out there. So obviously, if they're living in an old shitty dwelling, they're going to get complaints, day in, day out, just as many as the property managers do, because they're going to be complaining, and the people that live in are going to rightfully complaining. By the way, not in a lot of the cases they've got all the right in the world to complain. So now they're moving them onto the new shinier dwellings, and you know what? They'll pay an extra $10, $20 there, and all of a sudden, what we're seeing is this vacancy of older dwellings that have been unattended for many years. I'm not talking about many months. I'm talking about many years, where even garages at one time were turned into granny flats, ad hoc granny flats, and people were leasing them out. It was incredible what was happening 5 years ago, but the tide turned, and I was saying sooner than later it was going to turn, and it has. And now it's all amassed, and it's going to keep on. That tidal waves just keeps on growing.
Yeah, okay. And I've got one last question to ask you, Edwin, on this whole area. There's something else that's in the back of my mind, and it's to do with land tax, right? So we know that in recent times, the land taxes in most of Sydney, but in that area, have gone up quite considerably because, of course, values went up. So what's happening there now with land taxes?
Well, from my calls out on my social media platforms, obviously the government have got a deaf ear to it all, because let's face it, they don't want to give back the money, or let's say stop taking the money that they've been taking year in, year out for the rates as well as land tax. All based on land values. So, that's a question perhaps we need to ask the government, Martin. And I've been trying to on many platforms, and I've noted that in some of my colleagues have been telling them where their clients have had they've gone back. With the so-called land tax bills and ask for a refund, because they're saying, hey, look, this is the new valuation that I've got. This is what you're valuing the land at, and this is the current valuation, and there's 30% gap between the two. Obviously, the government would like to think that the land values are still going up, so they can charge us more, but the reality is they're not. So I don't know when they're going to start pulling back on that. Let's hope it's sooner than later.
So does that mean that if you've got a property, wherever it is, and you think that your property value has gone down, your land value has gone down, can you initiate a conversation with the local authority to get it revalued?
You should.
Right.
You should, because you should, especially people that are holding on to multiple properties. Obviously, the threshold is above the million from what I rough figures. It's around the threshold is around $1 million, and then you start getting the main tax starts being prorated, and you pay more as you amass more. So people not only in Sydney, but all over should be looking to claw back some of the excess fees if they're paying things up front, or if they whatever, because at the end of the day, the valuer general doesn't go out and do valuations like the bank valuers do.
Sure. No, it's very infrequent, and it's very approximate, isn't it? So a little notice to our viewers: if you are paying land tax, it's worth checking to see whether, in fact, what you're paying is still legitimate, or whether you can perhaps claim some of it back. Okay, so the last point then, before we round this out, we know that there are more people now looking to bring their properties on the market because they're thinking that prices will slide further. And we know that the number of listings, therefore, were likely to go up. So do you think prices are going to continue to slide in this area going forward?
Oh, very much so. They're sliding all over Sydney, Martin. Let's not kid ourselves with some of the rubbish that the mainstream are trying to push out. It's a fact now. We saw a retraction of about 9,000 properties that got taken off the market over December. In January, we started gauging an extra 5,000 to 6,000 properties coming back on, and the numbers are continually increasing. In our last video, I mentioned to you the number of agents that I've been talking to all around Sydney, in the eastern suburbs, North Shore, and northwest and southwest. They're all telling me the same thing, and that is that they're getting called out to do more and more market appraisals than what they have been before. And although that's only a small sample, but it's a reflection of what's happening out there in the wider space. So yes, I believe that more and more people are going to want to get out as the property values go down, especially the ones that are now transferring into to principal and interest. One of my clients, just called me 3 days ago and said, look, at the end of this month, I've got to go to principal and interest, and that's going to mean a difference of $1,500 a month. I can't afford it. I need to sell to the investments. So, and they're the things that a lot of agents and agencies are going to be confronting. So we're going to see a lot more listings. We're going to see, obviously, and lending isn't getting isn't being loosened up, and I don't think the banks will loosen up their lending policies. I think they'll keep them as they are. So therefore, it's harder for a lot of people to get credit, and so it's going to be interesting. I'm still calling that 12 to 15% drop before the middle of the year, Martin. I think panic stations is going to start coming into play. There's going to be a lot more supply than demand for various factors that we've all discussed. And look at what's happening with the development areas, the developments, Martin. There's whole apartment blocks being sold off in one line now, because developers are just falling over left, right and centre.
Well, I was talking to somebody today who went to get the next tranche of finance from the bank to support their development program. And basically, the banks just said no. They're no longer going to do that type of lending. So,
and this is going to be an interesting scenario moving forward, and that is you're going to see all these half finished, quarter finished, or quarter started, or holes in the ground. You're going to see some that are going to be 80% complete, 90% complete, and developers and builders are going to go broke. Who's going to take over those projects? Because whoever takes over those projects, the builder that takes over those projects have to also certify the work that the previous builder has done. Who's going to take on that liability is a question that needs to be asked as well. And I can assure you, regardless of all this, Martin, as I've said for a number of years now, we are building more than what we need, and we have been for a number of years, except now it's caught up with us. I believe there's enough in the pipeline that's been under construction to support us for the next 4 to 5 years here in Sydney in particular, and that's if construction stopped tomorrow. And it's not going to stop, it's going to continue. So again, people might throw the bone and say, oh yeah, but immigration under the new government could potentially double. I said, well, let's see how many migrants come into the country with $300,000-$400,000 in the back pocket to put a deposit on a home. The figures that were being thrown around a year ago was that from a survey over the last 10 years, only 15% of the migrants that got brought in over the last 10 years are gainfully employed. So what does that tell you? We're going into serious problems, and that canary is well and truly cooked.
It's looking pretty sick for that canary at the moment, isn't it? Is it a dead parrot, I ask myself, Edwin?
It's one of those I grew up seeing cockfights when I was a young boy in the highlands of Ecuador, and I would go and see the rooster fights, and yeah, that canary looks like one of those roosters that lost the fight.
They're toast. Edwin, I appreciate your time today. Thank you so much for that. It's a really interesting conversation. And I think it's benefited getting really granular and really local because, of course, all of the averaging that everybody talks about misses the point, doesn't it? You've got to really look local to really understand what's going on.
You have to, and I always say, reach out to your local real estate community. Reach out if you want more answers. Reach out to them. There are some great people out there. You've got your bad apples. Yes, I understand that. But look, I can say at least 30-40% out there, Martin, are great people to be in the industry. They've got the right heart and the right attitude. So reach out to your local agent, but don't just reach out to one. Call 2 or 3 to get, and then gauge your opinion and ask them the things that we've talked about with regard to marketing, advertising, the whole bit. You've got to look at it holistically.
Yeah.
But there's some good people out there, and we're not as bad as what they make us out to be.
Well, I'll put a link to the earlier video because there was some great advice and people really appreciated that. Good to talk to you, Edwin. We'll catch up again soon, eh?
Likewise, and I compliment you on your new hairdo. I said that was one of my new prophecies, my predictions for 2019. That Martin North was going to get a new haircut, a new hairdo for 2019, and I didn't foresee your green screen changes, but I'll see what else coming. And I wanted to emulate you. I got my haircut because in that episode that we did about the Opal Tower, I was criticised, and they said that there was there might be a bit of movement in my head because he was getting too tall, and I went beyond the height restrictions with my hair, so I got a haircut for this video.
Well, I got my hair cut because it was 60 minutes, and the rest is history. Thanks, Edwin. Catch you soon. Cheers.
Cheers, Martin. All the best.